Oh, look, first of all, wow, we had a bit of rain, eh? Praise God for the water gardens and filled tanks and reservoirs and things. That's the best way to look at it, I think. Look, firstly, I want to say I consider it a real honour to be given the opportunity to speak here today, so thank you, Wayne, so much for inviting me. What I've got to share is pretty heavy. I've been through a bit of a crazy journey, but by the grace of God, I'm still here to talk about it, and that's such an honour. Daisy, I can't spell, it's drug and alcohol education supporting youth. So what I'm sharing today is my story, but a little bit of some of what I teach in the schools as well, that's come out of all of this. Okay, just going to the start. Every day around the world, the lives of millions of people, addicts, both addicts and their loved ones, are torn apart by the horror of addiction, drug and or alcohol addiction. Families are torn apart at the tragic and often sudden loss of a precious loved one, a son, a daughter, brother, sister, mother, father, cousin, workmate, husband, boyfriend, girlfriend, wife, neighbour, work colleague. It's just a disastrous thing. I'm putting it that way. I know that's it. Yeah. And I can see it up there too, but I can't read. At the age of 25, I very nearly became a part of that statistic, and I'm then dying. Now, not everyone affected by drugs died. Some people have a life just tragically trapped in a cycle of addiction, and it affects everyone around them. But for me, it was very, very close to death. But amazingly, quite miraculously, I survived. And what I'm here today to share is some of my story. That was me as a little girl. Wasn't I cute? Bowl haircut, chubby cheeks. Look, I grew up in a loving family with hard-working parents. I've got two brothers, an older brother and a younger brother. And from as young as I can remember, I loved horses. And I used to beg Mum and Dad to buy me a pony, and as I grew bigger, the pony became a horse. And when I was about 15, my parents bought me my first horse. But in my teenage years, my dad also bought a speedboat, and my brothers and my dad and I learned to water ski. So I was really fortunate. Mum and Dad weren't wealthy, they worked hard for what we had. But I was blessed at birth with a strong, fit, healthy body, born into a loving family. I had good friends, good schools, and I was sporty and athletic, so things were going really well for me. But like so many teenagers, when I hit my teenage years, I started to take a few risks. I must add that also my parents changed me from high school to a private school in year 10, and I just really wanted to fit in, so I guess I sort of became a bit of a follower. And the risks that I took were pretty crazy. I'm just going to go briefly through this because we've only got half an hour and I've got a fair bit of a story. But it started for me just, rebelling a little and just wanting to do what others were doing. This is a very common slippery slope that people fall down. And there's a lot of people out there that try to say there's no such thing, but believe me, it's real. People around me were drinking alcohol. I was underage, just looked like a bit of fun, so I joined in, and this is what kids do. Somewhere along the line, someone offered me a joint, marijuana. Now, I was sliding down this slope of wanting to fit in. That was actually a defining moment in my life because I never stopped to think about whether or not I would ever use drugs. No one actually came to our school and warned us about it. We didn't have drug education. Our education came from our peers. Anyway, totally naive and ignorant, I joined in and started to smoke marijuana. I just wanted to see what it was all like. I just wanted to fit in. At 19, I moved out of home and I went to live in a really pretty town on the Mornington Peninsula. And I moved into a rental property with one of the local girls who was really lovely, but she was also really into partying. And our house became a bit of a party house. And now we were both regularly smoking, drinking alcohol and smoking marijuana. What happens when you move into that world is it's very easy to follow others. You're hanging around people using all sorts of drugs. And to start using other drugs, you've lost sight of reality from my point of view. You've crossed that line. People around me using hallucinogenic type drugs just look like a bit of fun. And I joined in with that. And I've got a real horror story in my book about what happened one night on the hallucinogenic drugs. They're potent mind-altering substances. I was never going to use what I considered to be hard drugs. But one day a friend came to visit and told me they'd been using heroin. Now I was really shocked at first, but also kind of curious because I knew this friend of mine had a full-time office job and looked pretty healthy, so I thought, it can't be that bad. And I asked if they'd get some for me, and I had my first taste of heroin. This is the slippery slope. I was slipping down. I was only ever going to try it once, and I've just got a picture of ice there as well, because that's very big at the moment. I was only ever going to try this once, but you know, heroin is a very addictive substance, and before long I had my second taste and my third. After a few years of living down the country, I moved back to Melbourne, and after a little while I met a guy and we started going out. Just so happened he'd been using heroin for a few years then, so now I had the contacts in Melbourne. What happens when you start using hard drugs is it's not uncommon to see overdoses. And I saw lots of people overdose and just resuscitate each other with mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. We didn't know proper CPR. And I actually overdosed 3 times myself, and one of them was particularly serious. You never think you're going to die. You're sort of trapped in this world of delusion, and you're losing touch with reality. I'm going to tell a story about something that happened to me one night, and it was absolutely terrifying. I need to cut it short, but one night we went out, and my husband and I had been, he was my husband and boyfriend, had been out drinking and watching a band play, and he sneaked out and scored heroin. He said he was going to the toilet, and he sneaked out and scored heroin. It was in St Kilda. And what happened was, when we came home, he just said, I'm going to take a shower. And I hadn't eaten for hours and decided to cook up a bit of a storm, and at 20 minutes went past, maybe more. When the food was ready, I knocked on the door to let him know, and there was no response. So I opened the door to stick my head in and call out a bit louder, and the room was completely filled with steam. All he managed to do was turn on the hot tap, and there was my partner slumped over an old heater, and instantly I knew he'd overdosed. Without going into the whole details, let me tell you, it took me nearly 40 minutes by myself in the middle of the night to resuscitate him. All I knew was mouth to mouth. At one point, halfway through that 40 minutes, I stood up and thought to myself, you know, here I am in the middle of the night on myself with my dead boyfriend. You know, what do? I'll have to call an ambulance, there'll be police. How could I tell his mum? And in sheer terror, I got back down to my knees and continued to give him mouth to mouth until finally a little noise came out of his mouth. You would think that that would be enough to stop us using the drugs altogether. Unfortunately not. You see, he was unconscious the whole time, so he didn't comprehend the severity of the overdose. And with him still using, how could I stop? This is a very destructive, very, very addictive drug and destructive drug. Over the next few years, we were both working full-time and continued using heroin, mainly weeknights or weekends, and I was sort of smoking lots of marijuana. There was speed, it was just, you know, you don't even realise when you're in the middle of this just what you're doing and how bad it is. And yet looking back from the outside, I can see that was crazy, the risks that I took. Anyway, things were going okay for a few years until all of a sudden I started having really, really weird symptoms. And without going into all of it, I broke out in hives and itches, and then I had arthritis, and I had all these weird symptoms. And finally I saw a rheumatologist who diagnosed me with hepatitis B. Now, Hep B is a really nasty illness in its own, but unbeknown to me or my doctors, I had complications. The only cure for it is rest. So they gave me 2 months off work, and I was still no better. So another 2 months, still no better, another 2 months, so 6 months. And by this time, I was gravely ill and didn't know what was going on inside. I could barely breathe. My girlfriend brought me a scarf or something to knit, and one row, and I was out of breath and exhausted. So Mum raced me into the Alfred Hospital, and she lined up for me to see a specialist. He did a series of testing, and at that point I was diagnosed with acute heart and kidney failure. I was raced through the hospital corridors on a gurney, and I was taken into the coronary care unit. I was only 25 years old, and I was in there with a lot of older people with heart issues. My heart was so enlarged, it was beating 300 to 400 times a minute, and my kidney function was less than 5% functioning in both kidneys. The condition was called polyarteritis nodosa, and a specialist in there at the time diagnosed it. And what had happened was my antibodies had malfunctioned and attacked my body, my heart, my kidneys, and my arterial system. And it got to the point that I was in hospital. At this point, I was given less than 2 hours to live. And I might tell you, I felt like dying. I could barely breathe. I was aching all over. I wasn't allowed to drink because my kidneys were failing. I just had ice blocks or a face washer, a wet face washer to suck on. My family raced in to be by my side. They were pumping me with drugs. My doctors were brilliant, but they gave me no chance. They said the only chance, it was described as a form of cardiomyopathy, and the only cure for that is a heart transplant. And I needed to find a matching heart within 2 hours. But then they said my kidney function was so poor that I wouldn't survive the surgery anyway. At that point, it just so happened my older brother had been one of these wacky born-again Christians for about 3.5 years. And he used to tell me about this Jesus bloke, and I used to, nah, that's not for me. I'm living the life. Well, now I needed a bit of help. And I didn't know, but he called on his pastor, who was a Baptist minister from Hampton, not far from here, Brian McKelvey, and they called on lots and lots of people, and I was told a few years back that a few hundred people prayed for me that night. And amazingly, I survived, but I was still critically ill in the coronary care unit. On the 7th day in hospital, the specialists were like scratching their head like, what's going on? You should be dead by now. And they sent me off to have another scan of my heart. And the result came back the following day, and I had 3 specialists come and see me, and one said, this is amazing. This is not the same heart. It's like you have a new heart. That's what the 3 specialists said. And amazingly, my heart had miraculously restored to almost normal. But that was, I forgot to show you my praying one. Lots of people praying for me. But that was not the end of the story. I actually spent almost 5 months in the Alfred Hospital because my kidney function was still very, very poor. In that time, I nearly died again. In fact, I had to be resuscitated. I was the first person in Australia ever to have a drug called interferon. It was flown in from Finland, and it was so experimental that they gave me too much. And what it caused me to do was throw up all the medication that was keeping my blood pressure down, and I was on anti-inflammatories, I was on a drug called cyclophosphamide, which was an autoimmune suppressant that they had to get permission from Canberra to use. Anyway, all of these medications came up, and my blood pressure went through the roof. I had massive grand mal seizures or convulsions. I fell out of bed, ripped out drips, and that's where I had to be resuscitated. My medical notes, I've written 2 books, and between the first book and the second book, I read my doctor's notes saying I necessitated acute cardiopulmonary resuscitation, which means my heart had stopped. And then I ended up in a coma, and I was put in intensive care again, and not expected to live. But meanwhile, which way do we go? The prayers continued, and amazingly I survived. And as I said, that was 5 months in hospital. In that 5 months, I started to realise I was only 25 years old, and I hadn't had any children. And I began to ask my doctors if I'd ever be able to have children. And they said, look, Kerryn, we're really sorry, but with the damage to your whole body, your arterial system, your kidneys, the medication, you're on too big a risk. We just can't, you couldn't do it, you'd die. The baby wouldn't survive anyway. And I was devastated. That wasn't the plan. I'd always thought, like most people, I thought maybe one day I'd meet someone and settle down and have a family. And to make it even worse, I'd done this to myself. But that wasn't the end of the story. God is a very merciful God. I still didn't know him, but the prayers were continuing for me. And I lost a few babies, which is absolutely devastating, and I talk about that in my book. But then I fell pregnant, and because I moved back in with my partner, and the doctor said to me, you can't go ahead with this, you need to have this pregnancy terminated. But I was just so determined to be a mum, I went against their advice, and I just thought, I'd rather die than not be a mum. That's where I was at that point. And it was really tough. I went into premature labour 13 weeks early, and I was put into the Monash Medical Centre, Queen Victoria Medical Centre, which it's not there now, as a hospital anyway. And I was in a ward with a lot of people in there who were there with drug addictions. It was really a very interesting time. I was now on medications, not illicit drugs. And then 7 weeks early, my kidneys went into severe failure, acute failure, and I had to have an emergency caesarean, so I've got the vertical caesarean. It was touch and go, but my baby, my son Kyle, and I both survived, and it was just amazing. So move on, 12 months, 13 months later. So this is now 3 years after I first was sick in hospital. And my kidney function had reached 40% when I first left hospital and hadn't moved in 3 years. And I started to feel incomplete with only one child. And I thought, to have another pregnancy with 40% function in both kidneys, I could die and leave my son without a mum. Meanwhile, my brother's Baptist minister had been inviting me to this wacky thing called a miracle meeting that was held in a room at the Dandenong Town Hall, and I used to, no, that's not for me. And finally, being desperate to have another baby, I thought, you know what, maybe there is a God. Maybe he can help me. I won't go along. I won't become a Christian or anything. I'll just go and say, thanks God, see you later if he does something to heal me. I went to this meeting and you wouldn't believe it. There was a woman who you may or may not have heard of. She's with the Lord now, Nancy Harkin. And she shared of how God had, she'd had heart and kidney failure and God had healed her. And I'm like, what? What? Heart and kidney, what else healed that? You know, and so anyway, at the end of the service, she asked people to come up for prayer. I was so nervous, I took Brian with me. And when I was there, I thought, well, I'm only coming once, I might as well pour out everything. And I poured out what I'd been through, that I was trying to have a child, I'd had heart and kidney failure, and I was married by this stage. My husband was a heroin addict. I just thought, I'll get it all out, I'm not coming back again. So, and Nancy began to pray for me. She just touched me on the forehead and began to pray for me. And I just felt this love wash through my body like something I'd never felt before. And I just burst into tears, and I wept, and I wept, and I sobbed, and I was a mess. And that was the day that the, where am I up to now? This way, sorry. So the 17th of July 1985, that I chose Jesus to be my Lord and Saviour. And what happened next, they took me down the back for a bit of, some of the council now. It was a bit of a council meal, it was a bit of a mess. And they asked, would I mind if I take my number and someone called me? I go, yeah, okay. And the next week I had a call from the pastor. And he said, oh, do you know these two guys? Oh, they wouldn't mind. Ray and Kenny Battles. And I'm like, how do you know those guys? The last time I knew them, they were dealing heroin. And he said, they've been coming to our church for about a year. So I was living at the time in Blackrock. They were in Moorabbin, and the church was in Endeavour Hills, and yet God lined it up and brought it together because they also ran a home group. And the place that I was in, my friends were still using drugs. I would never have gone to church had I not known someone who I could relate to, who'd been through nothing near dying, but the drugs and everything. And that was the start of my journey. It was incredible. Also, over the next couple of weeks, my kidneys, for the first time in 3 years, began to improve and improve and improve until I'm just inside normal. And I was blessed with not one or two, but 3 beautiful children. My children are all grown up now, they're all married, and I feel that I'm just one of the most blessed people in the universe to have survived this and to also have had 3 children with, I know God held my kidneys through those pregnancies. I'm just going to talk a little bit now about some of the things I talk about in the schools, because after I wrote my first book, Out of the Darkness, and I had my books here, a teacher read my book and invited me to speak at the school where he taught. And let me tell you, for me, speaking was an absolute terror, public speaking. I had heart failure, and my heart would pound, and the voice in my head would say, you're going to die now. And one day I woke up and realised, this is not about me. It's about him, it's about me. And after 12 years now, it's been very hard. I've had opposition. You be a Christian in the world trying to warn people about the dangers of drugs. There's opposition out there. But that's just some of the drugs on the market. There's many more. Just a couple of days ago, a young girl, I don't know whether it was Sydney or Melbourne, died after chromium.
Yeah, I think it was in Sydney.
Sydney, was it? Yeah, breathing 13
No,
years
sorry,
old.
it was in Melbourne.
Was Melbourne, was it? Yeah. Breathing in the chemicals from spray bottles, and it was a deodorant, I think it was. Yeah, so tragic. That's just some of the drugs that are out there on our streets. You know, in John 10:10, Jesus says, the thief comes only to steal and to kill and destroy. And I believe that one of his key tools that among our young people and older is drugs and alcohol. But then he goes on to say, but I have come that you may have life, and life to the full. And believe me, I've had my trials. Like what else has happened? I've been left with a thorn in my side. And I just want to say also, I meant to add this earlier, when I talk about the things I've done in the past, I just want to add, and I add this in schools, I am not proud of anything I've done. If I could turn back the clock and change what I did and take away the heartache and pain that this brought to me and my family, I would do it in a heartbeat. I will take it all away and change it back, apart from meeting Jesus. But you can't change the past, as we all know. So what I'm doing is using my wisdom, my knowledge, my experience to warn and educate as many as I can. And I tell you this in case you know any schools or any places that my message might come in handy. Anyway, so he's come to give us life and life to the full. And I've had an amazing life with lots of ups and downs. My husband continued to battle addiction for many, many years until finally I realised I was enabling him. And I ended the marriage, and he has actually finally got it together, which, praise the Lord, it's wonderful for him, for our children. And also, I had to stay, was left with a thorn in my side. There's consequences. God may heal, he may forgive, he may give us eternity, but there can be consequences, and I've had to take medication for my blood pressure and my kidneys for 40 years. And 16 months ago, once again, I had to, well, the only time I had to have open heart surgery. So I've actually been cut from top to bottom because of the choices I made as a child, but I still stand here, praise the Lord. So yeah, there's consequences, but I have had so many blessings as well. There's also warnings in the Bible about drugs and alcohol. Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. And I think that's really important for people to understand. There's also, in the Greek translation of the Bible, the word pharmakia is used, and it's in Galatians and Revelation that relates to the word pharmacy, or the drugs to do with pharmacy, but it also relates to sorcery and witchcraft. And taking those mind-altering substances, I believe, is absolutely stepping into the dark side and opening up that whole dark world. And I had some horror stories of things that happened in that time. Not that way, that's right. So why? Why do young people use drugs, or older people as well? There's many reasons. Drinking and drugs, like me, a lot of people use it just to fit in. You know, you want to be part of the crowd. And we all want to be social and fit in with other people. We think it's going to be fun or cool. Let me tell you, there's nothing fun or cool about being addicted to drugs. We all grow up, this is another reason. There's many different reasons, but I've just given a couple. We all grow up in different circumstances. Some of us have lived in safe, secure, loving homes, and some of us do not. You know, there's traumas and challenges that people go through. There's family breakdown, divorce, abuse and neglect, bullying, grief and loss, depression or anxiety, mental health issues, family violence. My advice to anyone going through any of this, especially when I speak to young people, is talk to someone. Within the schools, they have counsellors, psychologists, chaplains, well-being. And I'm talking in particular about self-medicating. I make sure that anyone who hears my message, I'm not saying don't listen to your doctor. If your doctor gives you something to help you get through something, well, listen to him. If you're not happy, see another doctor, get a second opinion. But self-medicating just leads to so many more problems. And the other thing to think about is never give up. I'm a living example that there's always hope. There's always hope. I love this saying here from C.S. Lewis: hardships often prepare ordinary people for extraordinary destiny. It's an amazing little word. So many people you see, even the parents of the girl who died the other day from chromium said, we want to make it our life mission to educate people on this, like what I'm doing, like what so many people doing. Yeah. So why? This why is a question I actually ask myself. Why did I go down this path? And there's a few different reasons. First of all, biblically, the Bible in Proverbs 29:18 says, in the King James Version, says, my people without a vision perish. I went to school, I got a job, and I partied. I had no vision for the future. Mum and Dad were working full-time in a very stressful business, so I don't blame them, but it made it harder for me to really have some sort of vision. And so that's what happened to me. Have a dream. Aspire to do something great. This is some of the advice that I give young people, whether it be career, travel, sport, fitness, adventure, helping others. I really focus in on the benefits of helping other people. It takes your mind off your own issues as well. And just having a goal of some sort gives people something to aim towards, work towards. Without a vision or plan, we can so easily drift and fall into the trap of drugs and just have a life of regret if you survive. A life of regret. The other reason that my life went down this way is I made choices. And I take 100% responsibility for the choices that I made. You know, we didn't, as I said, we didn't have any education, but I knew it was illegal. I knew it was wrong, and I made some choices. And the next reason is a little bit trickier. Some people may understand this and some people not. Well, what I haven't told you is that when I was 19, I headed off on the hippie trail to Kathmandu, and I actually contracted typhoid fever. And I spent 10 weeks in Fairfield Infectious Diseases Hospital, where I nearly died. 6 years later, 25, I had the heart and kidney failure called polyarteritis nodosa, itis meaning inflammation. So I've had fever and inflammation. Now I believe that this is my story, that I was under a bit of a curse. I had family members, direct family members, who were involved in a particular secret society where blood-curdling oaths are sworn. And if you look through my family, you can absolutely see the marks of a curse. About God, about God. And in Deuteronomy 28:22, it reads, in amongst these blessings and then curses, under the curses, two of the many signs are you shall have fever and inflammation. And I nearly died of typhoid fever, and then I nearly died of my whole body inflamed. So that was a curse. It came under the curses in the Bible. Jesus, I love this. What I've told you, I'm not proud of my past, as I said. I wish I hadn't done it, but it did lead me to Jesus in a very wonky way. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has gone and the new has come. What you see here is the new. That was the old. I still talk about it because it's a testimony and it's powerful and it's a warning to many people that might be vulnerable. And this scripture here I absolutely love. Praise the Lord. I've done Psalm 103 verses 2 to 5. Praise the Lord, all my soul, and forget none of his benefits, not all of his benefits. Who forgives all of your sins. I know he's done that. He took my sins on the cross before I was even born and shed his blood for me. Heals all your diseases. I've been healed of hepatitis B. I was one of the 20% who spontaneously recovered from hepatitis C with no treatment at all. And the polyarteritis nodosa, I was expected to have symptoms of that for life, and I've had none. So praise the Lord. Who redeemed your life from the pit. Well, I was in the pit. Crowns you with love and compassion. You know, the mercy that he showed me. If I had died at that time, my brother had witnessed to me, I had rejected Jesus. I wasn't going to see him. The mercy that he showed me, the forgiveness, the second chance that he gave me is unbelievable. So he crowned me with love and compassion. Satisfies your desires with good things. Well, the thing I think of first up is I was told I would never have any children. You know, that day that I burst into tears, I had doctors saying you won't live, you will be bedridden, you'll rattle with pills, you'll never have any children. I had all that spoken over me. And as I was born again and cried, all this, God just reached, I felt him just pulling all of this stuff out of my being. It's just unbelievable. And I have my 3 beautiful children. So that your youth is renewed like the eagles. Well, I feel young in some ways, I'm getting older, but I feel young. I've also, just to show you the books, I've got them out the back if you're interested. This one has actually helped a lot of people into rehab or off drugs or alcohol. It's really blown me away. Even my ex-husband called me a year after I'd written it and said I was never going to read it. But he said, I think God's anointed that, and within a few weeks he was clean of everything and he's doing really, really well. So pretty amazing. This one is the more secular version. It's got a biblical title out of Ecclesiastes, and it's got biblical principles all through it, but it's also got lots of other stories. I've got a suicide note of my friend's son, who took his life because of ice, and that's very, very common. I've got an educational side of drugs. I've got my story, but I've left God out of it, so that I can reach other people in the world, because I'm also called as a drug and alcohol educator, and it's got lots of that sort of information there as well as a really powerful story. And just to finish up, oops, I keep getting put that way. I love this psalm. I know my time will come one day, and I look forward to the day when I meet my Lord and Saviour. But I love this scripture. At the moment, I will not die, but live, and I will proclaim what the Lord has done. So thank you, that's my story. God bless you all.